Hi, I'm Whitney.
And I'm Camden. Welcome to Ghosts and Garnets, Murder in Idaho.
I don't even know what to say.
Episode 16. You don't even know what to say. Well, guys, that's it. We don't have anything else to talk about, so
I've run out.
We're shutting her down.
I have no more words for you. No, this is one of those episodes, I think, that makes me feel like I've been hit in the head.
I know, right?
Crazy. So, guys, the story we're going to tell you today is the story of Claude Dallas and his totally entitled determination to just live as he pleased. That led to a showdown with two fish and game officers in his janky trapping camp in one of the wildest places in the continental United States. And I think the thing that is so crazy to me is that this guy, for many people, was put on this hero cowboy pedestal.
Yeah.
And this guy was a doofus.
I know. It was maddening, I think, to read when I was reading articles and stuff about it, just to read how people thought that he was just standing up for his own rights and he's a hero and he's a great guy. And I'm like, everyone else has to follow the laws of the United States of America, sir. Just because you decided that they didn't really work for you. I mean, let's be clear. Going to prison for murder doesn't really work for me if I have some vengeance I need to work out. But I'm pretty sure if I got caught that I'm just gonna have to go.
I think the differences between this and Ruby Ridge for me is that Randy Weaver legitimately believed that he was doing the right thing. Not that it was the right thing to do at all, what he did, but in his brain, he was really being attacked by the government and he was really defending his family. This guy is just a lazy, bad at his job asshole and used this idea that people had that he was, standing up to the government. No, he wasn't. He just didn't want to follow the fucking law.
He was being a baby. He
was being a giant fucking man baby. That's what we should call this episode. Man baby, Claude Dallas. TM.
TM. Oh my gosh. Well, also, I'm just going to tell you before we get started on this. Have you ever been to Crumble?
No, but we have the other one here. What the fuck's it called? My brother worked there. We have like Crumble's cousin. And of course, I can't remember the name of it.
Good story, Whit. Good story. Well, we got one in Lewiston. I don't know, a couple of months ago or whatever. And every time that I went to Lewiston was on a Sunday. And of course, they're closed on Sundays. But this weekend, we had to take our dog to the emergency vet. And then we went to Lewiston and I said, I need to stop at Crumble Cookie because it has been a day.
Chip. It's called Chip here.
God, here we go again. Just kidding. And anyway, I got one of their like party boxes or whatever because I'm like, if I'm going in, I'm going big. And
right.
Let me just say they were delicious.
Yes, they are very good.
And you could just like cut little pieces off each one and try them all. They're so big.
They're enormous. Yeah, and they're so good. And they deliver in Boise. Chip does. So you can have them deliver you cookies and milk.
That is a phenomenal idea.
Yes. Did Jacob like them?
He did.
Okay.
Let me tell you, he really loved the golden Oreo crumb cake cookie. It was his favorite.
That's so fancy.
I know. It may have been a house favorite, but anyway.
Hey, Crumble, if you're interested in sponsoring the show.
We love you.
And you could pay us in cookies.
Yeah, we're easy to please.
We're open to negotiation. Cookie negotiation.
Yum, yum.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, now that we've gone down that road, shall we?
We shall.
In the winter of 1981, in a desolate southwestern corner of Idaho, 3 miles from the Nevada border, Claude Dallas set up his trapping, and let's be honest, illegal poaching camp. The BLM was leasing the area known as Bull Basin to the owner of 45 Ranch, Don Carlin, to winter his cattle. This is where 2 Idaho Fish and Game officers would be violently shot in the back of the head execution style and would eventually lead to Dallas becoming the 400th fugitive listed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. This giant man baby, Claude Lafayette Dallas Jr., was born March 11th, 1950 in Winchester, Virginia. His family soon moved to Michigan, and this would be where he would spend most of his childhood and where he learned to love trapping and hunting. As a boy, he could be found spending countless hours filing his own spurs, which is crazy, and collecting books about the Old West, dreaming of someday living like the 19th century characters he read about. He graduated high school in 1967 and headed out west to become a buckaroo. I had to Google what a buckaroo was because the term was used so often. It's just another word for cowboy.
It generally is used with children.
Then it's perfect for him.
Or I watched like a City Confidential on this, and they also use the term buckaroo, and I've never heard it described for an adult human person, but it does seem very fitting for him.
It is fitting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He hitchhiked his way across the United States, finally landing in Oregon, where he earned a living as a ranch hand and trapper. He worked on the legendary Alvord Ranch and for other outfitters in the remote reaches of the Oregon, Idaho, Nevada outback. By all accounts, he was a quiet, unassuming young man with an extraordinary work ethic and a passion for all things Western, including firearms. He was photographed in a National Geographic piece on the region's buckaroos. And he looked happily out of time in his buckaroo hat and denim jacket. One of those pictures would end up on the cover of Jeff Long's book, Outlaw, The True Story of Claude Dallas. So, claiming to have been out of contact with his family back east, he maintained to be unaware that draft notices had been sent to him, ordering him to report for induction into the U.S. military during the Vietnam War. Dallas failed to report for duty on September 17, 1970, and the U.S. government issued a warrant for his arrest. He was eventually tracked down more than 3 years later by the FBI and arrested for draft dodging on October 15, 1973. He was transported to Ohio and released to the custody of his parents. At trial, the draft board could not prove that Dallas, who was working as a cowboy on the Alvord Ranch, ever knew of the induction letters and charges were dropped. However, this experience led him to deeply distrust the government. This attitude led Dallas to disregard game laws. He decided he was living in a manner that exempted him from such annoying things as the law.
So I did see somewhere that this guy absolutely got his draft notices and tore them up.
Well, I would not be at all surprised.
No. So even back then, the law did not apply to him. He did not care.
No.
All right, guys. So we are going to bring you forward to the time of the crime. Don Carlin was the owner of the 45 Ranch, whose cattle were grazing for the winter in an area known as Bull Basin, and they were leasing that land from the BLM. 10 days before, Eddie Carlin, Don Carlin's son, had stopped by Claude Dallas's camp to sort of check it out. It was on the land that they were leasing. It's like, what's this asshole doing here? And while he was there, he noted 2 illegal bobcat hides, as well as a poached deer. When Eddie mentioned to Dallas that Idaho Fish and Game would be checking the area out, Dallas responded, quote, "I'll be ready for them." Eddie's meeting with Dallas made him uneasy, as Dallas reportedly told him that he, quote, "settles his business with a gun." Shut up, Claude. Don and Eddie had noted that another trapper on the property was illegally poaching sage-grouse, so they rode to a nearby Native American reservation to use the phone and called Conservation Officer Bill Pogue of the Idaho Department of Fish and Game. They registered a complaint about the sage-grouse poachers, but they did not report Claude Dallas, which I think is weird, because he was clearly poaching more than birds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Bill Pogue and his partner, Officer Conley Elms, responded to the complaint And as they were about to leave the Carlin's ranch, Eddie Carlin's wife mentioned the guy at Bull Camp, who was Claude Dallas. At that point, Eddie decided to tell the officers about Dallas's poaching and warned them to be careful. The two officers looked into the sage grouse poaching first, then approached Dallas regarding the alleged poaching infringements in his camp. Now, there are different accounts of what happened next, but during the subsequent trial, Dallas testified that while Elms was inside one of his tents that contained the bobcat pelts, Bill Pogue drew his weapon, although there's no evidence to support this claim. Claude Dallas reacted by shooting Pogue with his own .357 caliber Ruger Security 6 handgun, which he regularly kept concealed. When Elms exited the tent, Dallas shot him 2 times in the chest. Now, at this time, Dallas's friend Jim Stevens had driven up to the camp with supplies, and he saw what was happening in the camp and sort of, like a pansy ass, turned away from the confrontation that he was watching unfold. After the initial gunfire, Dallas used his .22 caliber lever action rifle to shoot both officers point blank range in the head. And then he strapped both bodies to a mule that he had and started heading off into the hills. But Elms was a big dude, and his body was too heavy for the mule. And so he ended up dumping Elms's body in the river. And then with Jim Stevens' reluctant help, put Pogue's body into Jim's truck. And then he ended up driving and dropping Jim off at a bar in Paradise Valley. And then he took off with Jim's truck. He eventually buried Bill Pogue's body very far away, right near a coyote den. So a few days after this happened, Stevens went to Fish and Game and reported what he had seen. He said that Dallas later told him, quote, "Nobody has the right to come into my camp and violate my rights. In my mind, it's justifiable homicide."
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about a little bit about this, but, in this area, Paradise Valley, it's this weird junction between the state of Idaho, the state of Oregon, and the state of Nevada. And it's essentially like prairie land.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of dry and desolate. And I don't frankly know why it's called Paradise Valley, but to each their own. It
does not sound like paradise.
It does not look like paradise to me either. But it's kind of like northern Idaho in the sense that people there tend to believe that what's theirs is theirs and nobody else needs to get in their business. And he was not the only one who thought this way. But it is surprising to me that a lot of these groups of people that are so firm on following the Constitution of the United States have such an issue following the laws of the United States.
Right.
You want your Second Amendment to be held up no matter what, but you don't have to follow the laws that go along with those guns that you get in the Second Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's real interesting. It's pretty convenient. Dallas and Pogue were ill met. The veteran game warden had a reputation as a hard ass, maybe sometimes too much of a hard ass, and Dallas obviously had a problem with the man, and he packed a .357 revolver on his hip, hidden under his coat. Somehow Pogue and Elms missed that, but I'm sure that they weren't even... Why would that cross their mind initially?
Well, and also he was holding the rifle, his 22, when they came into the camp, and Bill Pogue took the rifle from him. So he probably wasn't thinking that this guy had more guns on his body.
Had another gun.
Yeah.
Right. It may be that Pogue rode Dallas a little hard that day. Dallas claimed to be in fear for his life, but many think that's bullshit. Stevens testified that he never heard either warden threaten Dallas in any way. Pogue may have been the type of cop you can't reason with, but he wasn't going to shoot a man over a game violation. He was going to take Dallas to jail, and Dallas didn't want to go. This entitled asshole fled the scene of the killings and was on the lam for 15 months. The body of Wilson Conley Elms Jr. was sighted about noon from an Idaho Army National Guard helicopter. His body was lodged against a rock in the South Fork of the Owyhee River near Claude Dallas's tent. Dallas was charged with the murder of Bill Pogue, who was 50, and Connolly Elms, who was 34, on January 5th, 1981 in Owyhee County in southwestern Idaho. So remember, he's still on the lam for 15 months. It's crazy for me. They just think that friends must have helped him along the way in those backcountry kind of places. On April 18th, 1982, the law caught up with Claude Dallas in the northern Nevada desert, although he did make them work for it. When a helicopter swooped down on the dilapidated trailer where he was holed up in an area locals called Poverty Flat, he burst through a window and ran to an old Ford pickup and sped off. Within seconds, he had plowed through a barbed wire fence and was roaring across the open prairie at a speed that sent the truck hurling 5 feet into the air, and it crashed. Waiting for him were 2 5-man FBI SWAT teams, a few federal agents, Idaho and Nevada County Sheriff's officers, about 24 lawmen in all, armed with M16s, shotguns, and a rocket launcher. So crazy to me. Like, his reputation of being, Marksman sprayed the pickup with bullets, and Dallas was wounded in the left heel. Dragging his lever-action rifle, he crawled out of the truck and attempted to hide in the sagebrush, only to surrender quietly a few moments later. Some officers seemed almost disappointed that the fugitive hadn't put up more of a fight. For months, they had been telling reporters that Claude Dallas was one tough hombre.
No.
It's just like furthering the legend of what people made him out to be. This, like,
I know,
true, wild, badass cowboy. He was an outlaw, they said, a self-styled mountain man, out of step with the times, a quick-draw artist who had gunned down 2 conservation officers in a dispute over some minor game violations. They thought it a bold move for him to come back to northern Nevada, where he'd trapped and cowboyed for more than 10 years and was well known, but not surprising. But no one had expected he'd let himself be taken alive.
Well, no one expected that because he told everybody with fucking ears that he was not going to be taken alive. Okay? And then he gets shot in the heel and meekly is like, "Don't shoot me. I give up."
Wah, I'm hurt.
Yes.
Please.
Guys, you shot me in my foot. I have a nowie now. Idiot. So after they arrested this guy, he was going to go to trial in Caldwell, Idaho on 2 counts of first-degree murder. But the legal proceedings quickly shifted focus to the alleged aggressiveness of one of the victims, Officer Poe. More than one witness claimed he was contentious. And you know what? He was described even by people he worked with. He was a letter of the law guy. He did not care if you were his friend. If you were breaking the law, he was going to write you a ticket or he was going to arrest you. And yes, he was known as a hard ass, but he also did his job. That was his job. Mm-hmm. And it irritates me to no end that he was vilified.
Same.
So this issue did have an effect with the jury. And they had sort of a lot of contention in the jury room as well. They could not, like half of them wanted to completely acquit Dallas like he was a hero. The other half wanted him to fry. And so they did go back to the judge a couple of different times asking essentially if they could convict him of other things than what he was charged with. And the issue of Bill Pogue's being a hard ass certainly did seem to have an effect on some of the jury members. And what ended up happening is they sort of came to this middle of the ground agreement, and they convicted him of manslaughter, shooting these 2 Fish and Game officers, one of whom was in a tent when he pulled his gun, shooting them both in the chest and then getting a different gun and coming back and shooting them point blank in the head. Manslaughter. One of the jurors did say that they were concerned that he was acting in self-defense, and that was sort of the reasoning behind it. Jury foreman Milo Moore, a retired shopkeeper, said Dallas might have been freed outright if he hadn't gotten his rifle to finish the pair off. So he was found guilty of the lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter and was sentenced to 30 years in prison, which was the maximum he could have gotten. And the judge was pissed. The judge in this case was so irritated. He did not understand how any jury could come back with a manslaughter conviction instead of first-degree murder convictions. And so what he did, which I think is really interesting, is he did the manslaughter charges is a max 10-year sentence. So what he did is he did 10 years plus 10 years for another one, and then added 10 years for the use of a firearm. And rather than rolling them all up, he stacked them. So instead of serving 10, he had to serve 30 because he was so fucking irritated by this jury. So outside the courthouse, 4 demonstrators carried signs protesting the prison term Dallas received for the shootings. One said, quote, "Yesterday a hero, today a villain." Protester Lori Peake said, quote, "Dallas was just protecting his property and his home. They had no right to sentence him to 30 years for protecting himself." The protesters declared they had never met Dallas, but watched a TV movie about him and were convinced he was protecting his camp when he murdered the 2 wardens.
What the hell? This is so wild.
I almost watched the TV movie, but I couldn't bring myself to do it, and I should have. I should have watched it.
I should have too, probably, but
I couldn't. I get like the dumbass tingles so bad with this guy that I just felt like it was going to give idiot anxiety. I just couldn't do it. And by the way, this guy wasn't protecting his home. He wasn't protecting his land. Nothing he had in his possession was his. He was on BLM land that was being leased by another person. All of the animals he killed were got illegally.
Yeah.
Nothing he was protecting was his, okay? People who've never met him or know anything about the case, but did watch a TV movie and then made some signs.
Idiots.
Read a book. But wait, there's more. It was Easter Sunday, March 30th, 1986, that Claude Dallas escaped from the Idaho State Prison near Kuna, and he made the FBI's 10 most wanted list before remaining in the wind for almost a year. This is wild. This is wild. So there were a million reports from all over the country of people having these Claude Dallas sightings. And there were rumors he was in Nevada and Oregon, South Dakota, to California and Mexico. There was a rumor he had paid $3,000 for plastic surgery in Mexico to change his face. Where is Claude Dallas getting $3,000?
That's
guys?
what I was wondering. Mm-hmm.
So his escape really only grew the legend that he was this folk cowboy hero and that he was fighting this giant government machine. His crimes and elusiveness spawned 2 books, a TV movie, and courthouse groupies who called themselves, and I shit you not, the Dallas Cheerleaders. Well, this rugged, tough mountain man who's not going to be taken by the government or put in a cell was arrested in Southern California on March 8th, 1987, in front of a 7-Eleven with a jar of peanut butter and a loaf of bread, walking through a parking lot.
Yeah.
Yes, guys, your folk hero was at the 7-Eleven in California, living off the land, being a cowboy with his peanut butter.
So how did he escape was the question. Well, originally the authorities said he cut 2 holes in a fence and vanished into the desert. However, authorities now believe the original account may be false. Their skepticism is rooted in contradictory physical evidence, conflicting official accounts of what happened that Easter night, and the disappearance of an independent review of the escape. Rumors and doubts about the escape were so serious that in 2001, the Idaho Attorney General and the Ada County Sheriff, as well as the Idaho Department of Correction, began an 18-month investigation into the matter. The findings of the investigation resulted in a new theory. Prison officials faked the fence cutting to cover up the fact that Dallas outsmarted his keepers and simply walked out the front door with a group of visitors. The morning after the escape, prison warden Arvin Arave showed off triangles cut very precisely in the chain link fence to reporters and photographers, contributing another iconic image to the Dallas repertoire. The investigation into who actually cut the holes in the fences ended inconclusively, and the case was dropped in 2003. Dallas, with his ever-present "poor me, everyone is out to get me" claims, was acquitted of the escape charge by convincing a jury he had to flee because his life was endangered by guards looking to kill him. Like, seriously, 2 times now is he like the biggest charmer that has ever lived? Like, how?
I don't know. I don't know if everyone surrounding him was so stupid that it made him look smarter, or I don't understand.
I don't understand either. It is mind-boggling, if you will. After his acquittal, Dallas served his time in Nebraska, New Mexico, and Kansas, ending his final weeks in the North Idaho Correctional Institution in Cottonwood, Idaho. He was released February 6, 2005. He'd served 22 of his 30 years, shaving 8 years with credit for, quote, good time, which is basically just good behavior.
Yeah.
Even today, conservation agents grow furious over the killings in the 1982 verdict by 12 jurors that Dallas was guilty of manslaughter, not murder. Game wardens say the department lost its innocence that day in the desert. They say the killings of Pogue and Elms changed Idaho Fish and Game forever. Those who once viewed themselves as wilderness rangers became wary wilderness police officers. They spend a lot more time in training now, learning how to handle themselves in scenarios like this that we didn't train for before, said former Fish and Game Director Jerry Conley, who was somebody who testified at Dallas's sentencing. We remain horrified that somebody could have gotten manslaughter for cruelly killing our people and then following it up with shots from a .22 rifle, he said. One of Dallas's attorneys, Bill Mock, still sees Dallas as a victim. He fired on them after his privacy had been violated and after he was threatened by government agents enforcing game laws that he didn't believe applied to him. What in the actual fuck? That last sentence, actually destroys my will to live.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, I don't believe a lot of rules should apply to me. So should I just ignore them?
And have everybody feel bad for you and agree?
Yes.
I mean, mad.
I don't particularly feel like driving 10 miles an hour through a school zone, but I don't feel like it should apply to me. So I'm just going to plow right fucking through. Come on.
Come on.
So there is a memorial page dedicated to the fallen officers on the Idaho Fish and Game website. On this website, there are a couple different quotes that we're going to read you about these guys. So the first one says, quote, "If you worked with Bill, you had to like him. He was a fair and very hardworking individual. His knowledge of the woods and hunters was vast. I still have a hard time with the facts of his death. All I can say now is rest in peace, Bill. We will miss you." Quote, "This incident is recalled with great sadness, taking the lives of 2 men over some pelts. Claude Dallas is the poster child for cowardice. Macho mountain man, please. Yet when it came time to show real bravery and serve his country, he chose to run and let someone else go to Vietnam in his place. He is a coward. When he finally passes away himself, the fires of hell will leap 1,000 feet. Ooh, that is good.
You know, right?
Yeah. There is also a memorial for Bill Pogue and Conley Elms in the place that they were murdered. It is inscribed on the back with some of the men's favorite quotes, and on the front reads, quote, in memory of Bill Pogue and Conley Elms, end of watch, January 5th, 1981.
So sad.
It is so sad. And I think sometimes what people don't realize, and until very recently, I don't think I realized it, was that these fish and game officers they're policemen. They are law enforcement officers. We had, at my day job, we had a client who was a fish and game officer in Idaho, and he was trying to get a moose out of someone's house, and like a giant bull moose was in someone's home.
No.
And he tried to get the moose out, and the moose like jumped over a counter and got him in the eye with his giant moose antler. Yeah.
That's not funny, but.
Well, it's kind of, he's fine. He has a very snazzy eye patch. But when I was going through like his vocational history and stuff, I was like, oh my God, he's a cop. You know, he's not like a forest ranger. It's essentially, this man killed 2 cops and got away with it.
Right. And something else that I found super interesting, and I'd never ever thought about it this way until I read this story and I was reading about the people who worked with them and their colleagues and what they do on the day-to-day. And one of the things they were talking about is that, you know, they're not out there looking to mess with people, give them tickets, citations, arrest them. That's not their job. Their job is to be the protectors of the critters that are out there in the forest.
Yeah.
And make sure that people are doing it responsibly and legally. And it just kind of is a whole different way to look at what they're doing out there. You know, like the cops that we see on the road every day, those are there to protect people.
Right.
And these guys are out there to protect our wildlife. And I just think it kind of is super endearing to me. It's not to belittle or anything like that, but it's just, isn't that endearing that, and it's a different way to look at these people who are out there doing their jobs.
Right. And they're trying to protect the land. They're trying to protect this open space that is not covered with buildings. I mean, you want to have all of this, you know, all of these wild places to go and live and visit and hunt, but you don't want to respect the people whose job it is to make sure that it's protected and well cared for.
Right. Well, people are entitled assholes.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. Story. Did you read my O Idaho?
I did not. You told me not to, so I didn't.
Well, you know, I realize that it's a little long, but it's very interesting. This is about basically the whole investigation into Claude Dallas's escape from the prison.
Oh, good, because I have so many questions about it.
All right. So basically, it's an unsolved mystery. Mm-hmm. And Dallas won't talk about it. Basically, his attorney, Bill Mock, just said he wants to fade into the woodwork. And Mock can't disclose anything Dallas has said in confidence. But he was aware of the theory that Dallas walked out with the visitors and that officials covered up their blunder.
'Twas an out-and-out blunder.
I know. It was an out-and-out blunder. Okay, so Gary Doolin was the Attorney General's investigator who spent most of his time on the case. Doolin now is Chief Deputy Sheriff in Canyon County and has 27 years experience as a cop. He said, I think Claude Dallas walked out on Easter Sunday. We're asked to believe that instead of a slit, he cut 2 perfect triangles. Then after he's free, he runs across a fresh dirt field after a rainstorm, leaving no tracks. He keeps the bolt cutters or the wire snips, but loses his hat and his glasses fall off his face and into a glasses case in the parking lot 350 feet away. It's bizarre, he said. Another officer or investigator was last of Dillon had trouble believing that dozens of officers passed within 6 feet of one of the holes without seeing it. It's just not logical, said Dillon. To walk from the prison to the administration building, you had to walk past the hole. And everybody knew there had been an escape, but nobody saw the hole.
It's so embarrassing.
In 2001, Randy Blades was assigned to represent the Department of Correction in the reinvestigation. His job was to help overcome the agency's reputation as a shop run by good old boys. The least logical way that this thing could have happened has been bought, hook, line, and sinker, Blade said during one of the inquiry's interviews in 2002. George Baird is a 27-year correction employee who now runs the Community Work Center in Nampa. On the night of the escape, Baird was in charge of tools and weapons. He said he retrieved a pair of bolt cutters for another officer to cut a padlock on Dallas's workshop locker. Baird said he can't remember who got the tool, but suspects it was used to slice the fence. I believe for 20 years, Claude Dallas walked out our front door, Baird told the Statesman. Baird said he believes somebody up the command ordered a subordinate to cut the fences to hinder criticism that official incompetence led the state's highest-profile inmate to go free. Captain Jerry Redmond reported finding the holes shortly after he arrived from home late that night. It was the job of corrections officers to patrol fences. 2 officers conducted perimeter checks after the escape and turned up no holes. During a 10:30 p.m. shift change, dozens of officers passed the place where Redmond found the first hole, but none reported a breach. Redmond's a damn captain, Baird said. Why is Redmond out doing a fence check? A week after the escape, Deputy Warden Larry Wright expressed his concern about the failure of line staff to find the holes. It took the captain to come all the way from home to find where Dallas had cut the fences, wrote Wright. Prison records about the holes contributed to investigators' suspicion of a cover-up. The master log doesn't mention holes until a backdated entry appears the following day between 3:30 a.m. and 5:02 a.m., reporting rectangular holes found about 10:30. Oh my God. Redmond's report to Deputy Warden Burnick is dated April 8th. He wrote that Burnick reached him by phone at his home in Cuna at 10:35 p.m. and that Lieutenant Nemo called at 10:40 p.m. According to the prison's notification log, however, Redmond was also contacted at 10:48. Arriving at the prison, Redmond reported he was briefed by Nemo. Redmond wrote that he asked if the fence northwest of the administration building had been checked. I was informed that it had not, Redmond wrote. Redmond and Nemo left the building and found 2 triangular holes. Redmond did not specify the time, nor did Nemo in his March 31 report, but Burnick's April 7 report said Redmond found the holes at 11:04 p.m. If that is correct, and Redmond left home immediately after taking the third call at 10:48 p.m., he would have driven about 16 miles on winding rural roads, been briefed by Lieutenant Nemo, and discovered the holes all within 16 minutes. Asked how he could have accomplished so much so quickly, Redmond said, I don't know, but I did. Redmond told the Statesman he checked fences himself because, quote, they were making searches inside the yard, not on that perimeter fence around the administration area. The second hole, however, was at a junction of the perimeter fence and the administration fence, an area already searched by the 2 patrol officers. Doubts also had been raised about whether Dallas had wire cutters, as Warden Arave told the media. Lieutenant Jim Gibbison, the officer then responsible for prison investigations, reported to his bosses that several inmates told him Dallas had wire cutters. But Gibbison now says he had no solid evidence Dallas had such a tool and believes Dallas walked out the front door. I was there thumping around thinking that Claude had cut a hole in the fence and took off, Gibbison told the Statesman. I went along with the party. The party program was that he cut a hole in the fence and escaped. I didn't have enough knowledge at that time to pin down what was happening, but I do today. I think there was some type of conspiracy after Claude left, not before Claude left. Gibbison lost his job in 1990 when he was convicted of sexual abuse of a minor under 16.
For God's sake.
Yes. Nemo worked for corrections for 25 years and retired 2 months after his 2003 polygraph test. In a phone interview, he said, I'd just as soon let it lie. One big reason I retired was because it was a big screw job to begin with, and people want to keep blowing Dallas into a hero, and he's just nothing but a murderer. Asked if he knew anything about officers cutting fences, Nemo said, I don't want to talk to you about it, and hung up. But Redmond who retired in 1995 after 29 years, said there was no conspiracy. Didn't happen. Former Correction Director Murphy laughed off talk of a conspiracy. Listen to me, he said. This is asinine. That is just ridiculous. It didn't happen that way. It just didn't. Added Murphy, he went through the fence. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind. It's unquestionable. Murphy told the Statesman he doesn't believe Dallas cut the 2 fences, but that a civilian accomplice did it. I don't think Claude Dallas would have had the time to cut it himself, he said. Murphy, known for his take-charge attitude, he arrived at the prison on Easter Sunday night. In the days after the escape, Murphy told reports, "It's embarrassing. I'm embarrassed." He complained of prison design flaws and that he'd recently lost 18 officers to higher-paying jobs. Murphy now acknowledges that he and Lieutenant Jay Huser walked over footprints that may have been left by Dallas. We were looking for an escapee, explained Murphy. Protecting a crime scene is important in a homicide, but as far as protecting the obvious, I would have gone to the fence. Their disregard for evidence alarmed Corrections Officer Greg Claytor, who made 2 perimeter fence checks without finding any holes, and then found Murphy and Huser at the cut outer fence. Dallas, of course, remains the missing puzzle piece. He was silent on the topic at both his trial and on an internal prison hearing. Though acquitted in court, Dallas lost a year of his good time in the prison disciplinary process for escape and was ordered to repay $159 for damaging state property, the fence that he didn't cut.
I mean, here's what about this. He walked out the front fucking door.
He walked out the front fucking door. No question in my mind.
No, it's ridiculous. And these bumbling attempts at cover-ups are so embarrassing. That one guy is right. It is embarrassing. You should be embarrassed. Instead of just saying, hey guys, we fucked up. We let this murderer walk out the front door because we weren't paying attention. They try to create this whole scenario of wire cutters and running across an open field and nobody saw anything.
And weren't we just talking about this before we started recording? It is better to tell the truth than to lie.
Yes, you guys are embarrassing yourselves and embarrassing us, frankly. This is already embarrassing enough for Idaho. We already have enough going on here. I mean, they couldn't even get the shape of the fence cutting right. It's just come on. Or do like simple math to figure out how much time has lapsed between this guy leaving his house and writing down that he found holes in the fence 16 minutes later. It's just...
And then, curiously, it just kind of goes away. Well, that's convenient.
I don't know. It really feels like this guy, this Claude Dallas, just really has lucked out in his life to where he's just been surrounded by dummies. And
true enough.
And he just walks through. He just walks through life. He walks out the front door. And also something that I read that is so skeevy that he did is he tried, while he was in prison, he had one of his friends try to sell his saddle that he used when he was on the lam.
Mm-hmm.
He tried to have someone sell that saddle at the Pendleton Roundup one year while he was in prison.
Like, because he was, quote unquote, famous?
Yes.
This famous cowboy now?
Yes, by
Gross.
Claude Dallas's saddle that he used when he escaped the government after he murdered 2 people. Yes.
Ew.
So ew. The thing that sticks out the most to me is the people who were his cheerleaders at trial that fully admitted that they had no actual idea what was going on. And it's so prevalent to what is happening today. People just read one thing and jump off the cliff with it.
And decide it's the only truth. Oh, and by the way, I also saw a fictional movie on the matter.
Exactly.
So now I'm basically an expert.
I watched a television movie about this fake cowboy.
Lifetime original, Claude Dallas.
We might have to watch it now.
I know. I think we might be maybe like a date night. So, anywho, that is the story of our entitled baby man faux hero, Claude Dallas Jr. We hope you enjoyed hanging out with us.
And if you did, please give us a like and maybe a review anywhere you listen to your podcasts. If you would like to become a subscriber of the show, there is a link in the show notes. It says support the show. It'll take you right to Patreon, where you get all kinds of bonus content every week for subscribing to the show. So take a look at that. And if you are interested in sponsoring the show, you can reach us at ghostsandgarnets@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. We will...
As the dogs say, goodbye.
See you next week.